Right, welcome everyone to the third RobotPerf meeting. Let me start by sharing the minutes in the chat as always. And with this, I'll share my screen and we can start the discussion. So today's meeting, as I was saying, it's going to be 30 minutes. So let's try to get the best out of it. So previous business that we took on last week. So I took two actions on continuing to contribute in ROS to benchmark tooling that we are pushing forward and creating. On this regard, essentially, we did follow this one in alignment with the progress that we've been doing on the CI pipeline, but so far no new needs have been identified. We're trying to not overdevelop the tooling, but only develop tools that help out maintain the CI infrastructure. So for now, we can probably kill that one. And once we identify a new need for maintaining the CI pipeline or the repository, we'll contribute back. But for now, after further reviews, we believe that the tools out there should be enough for now. If anyone has any needs, just let us know and we'll see if we can allocate time. We've also been putting time into further maturing the CI pipeline. The objective, as I described previously, was to and is to push automatically the results for selected, if not all, benchmarks automatically to the repository by filling up the benchmark.yaml file of each one of the benchmarks. And this should happen automatically from an external build farm, which will run a CI/CD infrastructure for various boards. For now, and during this week, we've pretty much defined which are the targets we are initially going to be running on. We will not be running on all of the targets we have initially, but we'll be bringing them over. For now, we have selected AMD FPGA SoCs and the NVIDIA GPU SoC Orin, AGX Orin. So we'll be running on that and possibly also on two solutions from AMD, embedded solutions. And with those three targets, we'll kick it off. And then soon after, we'll be adding more AMD, NVIDIA, and likely also Intel targets. So that's kind of like the schedule and agenda. Don't want to give an
Sure. So one of the questions around this I have is, so these platforms, right? How do we determine which of these platforms? Is it like we know that those are the platforms that, for instance, obviously there's the general consensus of which platforms are Jetsons and so forth, but in terms of specific like AMD platforms and so forth, how would we go about it? Or is it that like there are folks at AMD and NVIDIA or someone that say, yeah, like these are the things that we would like to actually have evaluated for this?
Yeah, good question. So we're having conversations with some of these companies, some of these silicon vendors, and asking them directly what are the devices that is of most interest to them. In some cases, we get direct feedback. In some others, we need to dig a bit deeper. And in cases where we don't get direct feedback, what we do is we investigate what's being used in the ROS ecosystem, and we just pick those low-hanging fruits. Of course, there's many possible targets, and we'll be incrementing this over time. And we'll be happy also to include others, and we'll dive into this in future sessions. But for now, as we incrementally dive more and more into the RobotPerf project, we want to be conservative with three initial targets. Embedded targets, all of them are going to be FPGA SoCs or GPU SoCs. And then down the road, we'll start adding PCI GPUs and PCI FPGAs. We think that's the responsible approach. And then if future projects allow for it, we may also look into cloud instances, like big FPGA or GPU instances. And for that, we'll probably have to reach out to some of the cloud providers, but step by step. For now, BJ, short answer, we're having conversations with them and picking what's of most interest to them and what's being used in the ROS community. If you guys have any feedback on that, happy to take it. As I was saying, again, I don't think it will be ready for next week, but we're shooting in here for maybe 2 weeks from now to have an initial preview of how data gets pushed into the repo. So just for everyone to keep in mind, if you're working on benchmarks, just know that soon or in few weeks, they should be able to run in hardware directly. So pretty good news for those of you starting to cook your own benchmarks. So that's a check on our side. We'll nevertheless have listed that one as a follow-up task next up as well. So we'll continue working on that and continue reporting. Now I took a couple of items. I think Jason, you contributed them at the end of the meeting. You left a comment there regarding updating the nomenclature. So I did review this one, so I'm gonna check it if you're fine with that. Thank you for that contribution. I think there was a pending left over from the initial pull request. Do feel free to let me know how you'd like to proceed with that. One thing I wanted to clarify with you was there's this other pending pull request, which I guess is now superseded by 5. Are you fine if we just close this other one until you figure out how you want to move forward?
Yeah, I think that's best. I think if we go ahead and close that, because I had made all the changes we spoke about last meeting in the new pull request 5. And then I'm going to make another pull request for us to discuss the rest of the nomenclature that we didn't come to a conclusion about last time. But yeah, this pull request 5 only has the nomenclature we like.
Yeah, so that's inside already. So again, thanks for the contribution and very nice to have you guys in. Maybe can you comment briefly, since you have the mic? I think you listed this other couple of items. I also wanted to touch briefly on Rep 2014, but before doing so, I just wanted to make sure if you have anything on the
yeah,
on your end.
Yeah. So I'm currently working on like the stereo image process benchmark, and I'll share my progress on it. And I do have like some questions that I think would be helpful if I can get answered, or get some advice about how I should proceed. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, cool. So I'm working on the stereo image process benchmark, and in order to do that, I like set up a gazebo simulation of like this little robot that has cameras on it. And my whole logic behind this is that I need to simulate this robot in order to like collect some ROS bags of the image topics, so then I can pass that into the stereo image function. And so currently I have this like little robot that just runs around this environment, and it has 2 cameras on it. And if you go like into RViz, you can see what data is coming out of the cameras. But the problem that I faced was the stereo image process function depends, or it reads from like the left image raw and the right image raw topics. And the sensors that I had in my robot and gazebo were publishing to like a different topic. So then I found like a different plugin, and it's called it's this multi-camera plugin in Gazebo, and I tried to add that to my robot. So then, as I read, it would like publish to the correct topics. That's like what's required when you're running the stereo image function package. But that's not working for me right now. So that's like kind of where I'm stuck. Basically, the multi-camera sensor that I have on my little robot isn't publishing to like any topic with like the data it's seeing. So
just for us to understand
yeah,
properly, the initial approach you took on with the 2 cameras, was that publishing appropriately just on different topics, right?
It was, well, that's the issue. It was publishing on the same topic. All of it was just going into the same topic. It was going into like camera/image raw topic. So then that's why I thought, okay, let me try to maybe like it doesn't want regular cameras. Maybe it needs like a specific sensor. And that's when I came across like the multi-camera sensor to put in gazebo. But well, I guess my question here is, should I have like 2 separate cameras and then figure out a way for them to publish to different topics, and then that would be good enough for the stereo image package, or does it have to be a specific camera sensor that I add onto the robot?
So I think there are some stereo camera plugins available in Gazebo. We have used that. So I think let's just ping me like probably tomorrow or day after. We can just get on a quick call, and this should be an easy fix. It shouldn't take long. I can help you with getting the simulation up and running with whatever camera you want. Shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I was going to say that I'm sure there's also tutorials or documentation in that regard, but nevertheless, it's Jason that you pretty much got it. There's a functionality in ROS which is essentially topic remapping, which allows you
I tried that.
Okay, you tried at runtime to essentially remap things so that you don't get collisions in terms of the camera naming. So that should be pretty straightforward. You can probably also use some text directly in the Word file that you were defining, so that you can publish directly in different topics. So that's probably a pretty low-hanging fruit. And then in the launch file directly, you can also customize that further. So it sounds like you're pretty much there with what you have. Just a tiny bit. Can you describe what's the problem you encountered with remapping?
Yeah. So, well, 2 things. I think you touched on it exactly what like my problem was. When I had the 2 cameras on the robot, there was like a collision. They were both publishing to the same exact topic. So then I tried to remap, and I specified the exact topics that I want each camera to publish to. But then I just when I was looking at the topics that would be published, they weren't there. It just like nothing happened, which was really weird. So I'm not sure if it's like something I'm doing with the remapping that's incorrect, or like how I'm publishing the nodes. Yeah.
And I just did a quick search, and this seems to be a pretty well-known topic. But nevertheless, so feel free to work it out with Pratik if he volunteers to give you. Yeah, and if still becomes a struggle, feel free, guys, to jointly open up an issue, a ticket in the repo, and then we can tackle it together and maybe dedicate some further time on the next call. But yeah, this is definitely something we can take offline, I think. Just so that we know, Jason, can you give a pointer of which branch are you working currently on this?
I haven't. Yeah. I can push all of my work onto a branch. I was just working locally, but I'll push that and then.
Okay. Yeah. The reason why is because if you want some inspiration on how to structure the source code so that both simulation as well as the back files, the ROS back files, is somehow consistent. And I would recommend that, because then typically for the benchmark, we would rely, as you know, on the data set, on the ROS back. However, it's always handy to have, the simulation pretty much there with your code so that you can trigger it anytime and then generate new data if you want to. So a good pointer for that is probably the Perception 2 nodes. That is somewhat well-tested and well-known. And contains pretty much everything you need to bring it up. A subset of this is what we brought into the first benchmark, into RobotPerf. So just as an FYI. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. So the link that you just sent me is like an example of how you structured your code with like a simulation.
Yeah. So essentially, so here it is. And so we have here is the Word files.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then we have the launch files, and then the corresponding launch files just pull from those ones. So for example, if we were to check out this launch file, I want to see how we're literally pulling from one particular model. In this case, we're using this one, and then we're launching the corresponding nodes as appropriate. Well, these are the parameters, then whatever is coming up in here, just a simulation. But we can extend this launch file with much more logic if appropriate. But typically, just to keep things separated, you want to prepare a launch file that does the simulation, and then separately you want to launch your nodes for doing benchmarking or whatever. That's what's pretty much done in here. So you've got the simulation launch file, and then whatever other launch files for doing tracing in here.
Got it. And you should, like, this is the simulation part of the benchmark should go within the benchmark that we submit into like RobotPerf, right? So we're like you have right now like the A1 perception 2 nodes. Do we like within the benchmark that I'm going to submit, I'm going to also include like the simulation launch file. Do you think that's a good method?
I think it's up to you. Right now, right now we have it. Right now, let me rephrase that. Right now, we don't have it. One doesn't have the actual simulation. Just to keep things minimalistic for a first example, I just removed everything that was unnecessary except the ROS bag, which was pushed as a data set to the different repo. But it could be added very easily. And again, the file structure is this one, and the source code comes from this other repo, this other package, technically speaking. So it's pretty much the same. Since you're developing something new, if I were in your shoes, then I would probably just push everything into the same package. Just don't go crazy. Don't keep two of them, like the one you would submit and the one you would use for development. I would just develop one into the simulation files, because at the end of the day, every benchmark is a ROS package.
Right, and then yes, and so if we're going to include the simulation inside of the benchmark that we're going to submit, but we also want to save the ROS bags to the like the ROS bag repo.
Exactly.
How should we do that since they are like two different repos?
Well, just I guess pretty easy. For what concerns the benchmark, you would just submit a pull request adding a new benchmark. I guess A3 in here in this case, right? Stereo, whatever, you name it. And then for the corresponding ROS bag, once you have produced it and you're comfortable with that piece of ROS bag being representative, then you can just submit here a new pull request with the corresponding bag.
Okay. So do it in like two different steps.
Yeah. I mean, you can also here, but just since we are splitting things for just clarity of mind, we're just splitting things, and that's how we agreed it. So I would say let's keep it that way for now. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. So it sounds like you're having good progress. So cheers on that, and cool. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Cool. Okay. So I'll check this one, and what I'm going to do is, Jason, do you plan to continue on this? I presume so. Yeah, you've added yourself in here. Cool. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep in mind to mark these things, because otherwise I will forget. In that way, awesome. Okay, and final bit was Rep 2014. I think you mentioned something about reviewing this. Did I misunderstood, Jason?
Yeah, that's something still on my to-do list. I haven't got a chance to read through it.
No worries. I'm just gonna push this into the next topic. What I can do is, with the 10 minutes we have left, maybe I can bring the topic to the group. So right now, I did go through the pending comments of Rep 2014. The document, I think, in my humble opinion, is pretty consistent. But as I said in the past, also, I'm very contaminated. So very welcome to receive input. Right now, the only unresolved comment, as far as I can tell, is this one. This one, which pretty much hints about the fact that this developer doesn't believe that we need a motivation. And just to get everyone on the same page, the motivation section currently describes why benchmarking is important, the value for stakeholders, as well as introduces terms such as the differences between tracing and benchmarking, and then the various approaches, performance benchmarking, including the ones reviewing the state of the art and the prior work. And finally, what is the current state of the industry, and how essentially this complements what exists out there. I personally believe that this is actually a very needed section, especially given all of the things that it packs. So I do disagree with this comment, but I just wanted to bring this up to the group to see whether someone consider this as something unnecessary, and maybe we should jump straight into the metrics. So what do you guys feel?
I can like see how maybe it seems a little broad, but whenever I'm reading something, I always like to see that motivation. It always helps like ground what I'm reading. So yeah, I definitely agree that I don't think it's something.
Yeah, and it's important also to put in the right context. Most people reading this typically comes from robotics. So these are roboticists who may or may not know about systems architecture, benchmarking, and similarly, if whoever's reading this comes from architecture, and he or she is actually wanting to understand the context, I think this is going to help with the right nomenclature. So maybe I was actually thinking maybe one thing we can emphasize at some point, which is what I was planning, is that a reference implementation of this rep actually is being formalized in RobotPerf. That's one of the ideas I wanted to bring up to the group, if that makes sense. So I don't feel we should fully connect these two things because that would just contaminate things. However, pointing out that RobotPerf is an actual implementation of this is the full truth, since we are developing both things together. So maybe that could somehow mitigate the concerns on the need of the motivation, while at the same time reinforcing what we are doing in here.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep it.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, so I'll just resolve then that concern shared. And with this, I think the document is pretty much addressing all aspects of it. So I'll leave as a to-do, adding a small reference to RobotPerf ongoing efforts. I may do it, or Jason, if you want to contribute that, feel free to do it. And with that, I think we've progressed with Rep 2014. So once we get that in, I think I'll ping again the folks in here. Maybe I think it's time for moving forward with this. It's been quite a while since we started with this initiative. So I think it's starting to be ready to be accepted. Okay. So that's done. Any other topics we have or we'd like to discuss?
I think that was all on my side. Yeah, and I'll reach out to you, Pratik. Thanks so much for offering to take a look at this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Pratik. So, okay, if there's nothing else, maybe as an FYI, we'll do a hacking session to try to push forward the CI infrastructure so that data starts coming out. Maybe I can pick everyone's mind in here. I was thinking whether it does make sense to extend the benchmark.yaml format to have like a flag on whether that should run on the CI or not, so that the CI infrastructure reads the whole benchmark.yaml files, and then based on whatever's written, whether it should run or not in the CI, it will do it. I was thinking whether this makes sense. I think for now, we're going to default into every single repo is going to be run and every single benchmark is going to be run, and then results will be reported. I think for now, this is an acceptable assumption. But as we grow, if we grow to many, many benchmarks, then things may start taking hours, at which point we may need to start whitelisting things. But anyhow, I think it's a bit too early. Just sending the idea right now. We'll touch on this later down the road.
Yeah, sounds good. Oh yeah, so another thing I kind of wanted to bring up is I think we can, or this is a thought I had, is to create like a sign-up sheet for people who want to contribute a benchmark. But what kind of like format would be best? Would it just be okay to create a Google sheet and people can go on there and specify like what benchmark they're working on, things of that sort, and then we can link it in the GitHub page of RobotPerf.
I'm down. I'm down for anything. To be frank, if you want to take the lead on that, Jason, feel free to put it together. My feeling right now is we created a Google Sheet for bringing awareness and people to participate. And so far, the responses have been, I guess, limited to the folks that are participating. That's how I would put it, I guess. So I guess there's still work to do on dissemination that we will need to do ourselves. So I would just keep things simple in the sense that my gut feeling tells me, if you want to contribute, why don't you just open up an issue, a GitHub issue, and just say, hey, is there someone working on this, or would this benchmark be interesting? And that way we keep things concentrated in the repo. Because if we start spreading too far with too many documents, too many resources, things are going to be hard to maintain down the road. And as we said and discussed, I think, with you guys, with PJ and you, as things evolve and as people get more and more involved, we should set up like levels of commitment and maintainership in the repo based on their contributions, which will give more or less privileges. And thereby those persons also the ones who have certain privileges should also be involved into somehow steering and recommending which benchmarks should be prioritized. But yeah, I would. That's my gut feeling, Jason. But give it a thought and feel free to act on it. But my 2 cents would be: you yourself can probably open a ticket and say, "I'm working on the stereo image proc benchmark. Here is the branch where my progress is being pushed." So that way,
that sounds good, and it might be a good idea to, like, I might add something to the README of like how to contribute, and just specify like create a poll, like create an issue, and then specify like what you're working on.
That's actually a good idea. So maybe as part of that, since you are doing it yourself, maybe one thing you could do is there's something called GitHub templates for issues, which give you the possibility to, it's a super simple document. And the moment you start creating an issue, it gives you options. And maybe one of those options is, I want to create a new benchmark. And so when you create a new issue, it gives you kind of like a pre-filled template, which people can then use to bring up like their queries on that regard. So feel free to look into that. Maybe that's something you can contribute as well. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. Cool. All right, so we reached the top of the hour, folks. I need to take off to the next meeting. But thank you, everyone, and we'll meet next week. Thanks a lot, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.